And we're back with part 2, chapter 5, Early Tillers of the Soil. Institutions in the law appeared when the nomads settled down on the land and became agriculturalists. Man no longer limited himself to harsh combat against hostile forces. He began to express himself through the shape he imposed upon the world, to think of the world and of himself. At this point, the sexual differentiation was reflected in the structure of the human group, and it took on a special form. In agricultural communities, woman was often clothed in an extraordinary prestige. This prestige is to be explained essentially by the quite new importance that the child acquired in a civilization based on the working soil. In settling down on a certain territory, men established ownership of it, and property appeared in a collectivized form. This property required that its possessors provide a posterity, and maternity became a sacred function. Existentialism. I love indirect references between Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. Many primitive peoples were ignorant of the part taken by the father in the procreation of children, and in a few cases this seems to be true even today. They regarded children as the reincarnation of ancestral spirits that hover about certain trees or rocks in certain sacred places and come down and enter the bodies of women. Sometimes it was held that the woman ought not to be a virgin, so as to permit this infiltration, but other peoples believed that it would occur as well through the nostrils or the mouth. In any case, defloration was secondary in the matter, and for reasons of a mystical nature it was rarely the prerogative of the husband. Oh, so far we have come as a society. We went from women needing to lose their virginity to women being deemed sluts and whores and prostitutes for having sex. The tie between woman and land was still closer than that of ownership, for the matrilineal regime was characterized by a veritable assimilation of women to the earth. In both, the permanence of life, which is essentially generation, was accomplished through the reproduction of its individual embodiments. Go women. This is why pagan religions are so much better than orthodox ones. The land is woman, and in woman abide the same dark powers as in the earth. It was for this reason in part that agricultural labor was entrusted to woman. Able to summon ancestral spirits into her body, she would also have the power to cause fruits and grain to spring up from the planted fields. Women are magical. Interesting. Man would feel passive way back when, instead of women, and as we have discussed very thoroughly in the first 66 pages of this book, women are typically in the passive role. Maternity dooms woman to a sedentary existence, and so it is natural that she remain at the hearth while man hunts, goes fishing, and makes war. But among primitive peoples, the gardens were small and located within the village limits, and their cultivation was a domestic task. Through women, therefore, the life of the clan was maintained and extended. Children, flocks, crops, utensils, all the prosperity of the group depended on their labor and their magic powers. They were the soul of the community. De Beauvoir is going through a list of ancient goddesses now. Very interesting. If you haven't studied ancient pagan cultures, I recommend doing so. It's one of my favorite topics. Women have never composed a separate group set up on its own account over against the male grouping. They have never entered into a direct autonomous relation with the men. The reciprocal bond basic to marriage is not set up between men and women, but between men and men by means of women, who are only the principal occasion for it. Woman is only the intermediary of authority, not the one who holds it. The fact is that the relations of two groups of men are defined by the system of filiation, and not the relation between the two sexes. It is important to underline the statement that even when man was still perplexed before the mysteries of life, of nature, and of woman, he was never without power. When terrified by the dangerous magic of woman, he sets her up as the essential. It is he who poses her as such, and thus he really acts as the essential in this voluntary alienation. In spite of the fecund powers that pervade her, man remains woman's master as he is the master of the fertile earth. She is fated to be subjected, owned, exploited like the nature whose magical fertility she embodies. The prestige she enjoys in men's eyes is bestowed by them. They kneel before the other, they worship the goddess mother. But however puissant she may thus appear, it is only through the conceptions of the male mind that she is apprehended as such. It makes me think of the idea that women are put on a pedestal by men. You're so pretty, beautiful, perfect, lovely, smart, wonderful, whatever, and you have a long way to fall off a pedestal if you're put on one and you're seen without faults or problems. which everyone has. And the devaluation of women represents a necessary stage in the history of humanity, for it is not upon her positive value, but upon man's weakness that her prestige is founded. In woman are incarnated the disturbing mysteries of nature, and man escapes her hold when he frees himself from nature. It is the advance from stone to bronze that enables him through his labor to gain mastery of the soil and to master himself. Woman was venerated only to the degree that man made himself the slave of his own fears, a party to his own powerlessness. It was in terror and not in love that he worshipped her. He could achieve his destiny only as he began dethroning her. This is when, by the side of the goddess, there became a god who was her subordinate yet matched her. He was the male to her female. Ridiculous, totally unnecessary. For example, in Egypt, it began with Isis being the ruler of all Egyptian gods and goddesses. Yeah, Isis. And then suddenly, here comes Horus coming along, and it's Isis and Horus, this great couple. Then Ra shows up, in Egyptian culture at least, the god of the sun, who's suddenly the supreme being. No, stupid. That's a good quote. Men make the gods, women worship them. From a man named Fraser. Men indeed decide whether their supreme divinities shall be male or female. Woman's place in society is always that which man assigns to her. At no time has she ever imposed her own law. In organized patriarchal society, the slave was only a beast of burden with a human face. It's a good quote for veganism as well. When the society shifts from magical ideas to creative labor in agricultural societies, man claims everything, and suddenly the other becomes a threat. And if you remember from the other videos, other is woman. We've got Eve and Adam as one evil pair. And we've got Pandora. I adore Pandora. Makes me think of Doctor Who. The laws of man who define woman as a vile being who should be held in slavery. Someone's gonna get their ass kicked if they ever say that to me. We've got the Quran, which treats women with scorn. We've got the Bible. Canon law regards her as the devil's doorway. Romans consider her an imbecile. Laws of Solon give her no rights, etc. Even Pythagoras got in on the woman hate. No longer like Pythagoras. Damn it. It was my favorite part about geometry. How to make of the wife at once a servant and a companion is one of the problems man will seek to solve. His attitude will evolve through the centuries, and that will entail an evolution also in the destiny of women. That's the end of chapter 5 in part 2. All about ancient history, which is one of my favorite parts of history, actually, because women were treated, much more equally than they were in a lot of the rest of the history, which is nice. I always liked learning about that. So, that's all for today. Hopefully the next one will be up a bit sooner.